They thought she was just another woman walking into a courthouse. They saw the dreadlocks, the calm, the silence, and dismissed her before she spoke. But by the time they laughed and raised the clippers, it was already too late. Because Odessa Harper wasn't there to be judged. She was there to judge them. And when the badge on the table finally caught their eye, it wasn't just a title, it was a warning. This isn't a story about outrage. It's about what happens after. The morning fog wrapped around the courthouse steps like an omen, but Odessa Harper's heels struck through it with deliberate rhythm. The courthouse loomed above her, squat and indifferent, its red brick exterior weathered but still pretending to command respect. Spanish moss swayed from the oak trees framing the entrance, their long tendrils reaching like fingers through the damp air. A lone leaf scraped across the concrete as she approached, but she didn't pause. She never wore her power like a crown. She preferred silence until silence became complicity. At precisely 7:58 a.m., Odessa reached the main security checkpoint of Claiborne County Courthouse. She glanced once at the rust-stained sign above the entrance, then pushed through the double-glass doors into the chill of the lobby. Inside, the metal detectors buzzed faintly, the air carried the chemical tang of cheap floor wax, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead in a tone too high for comfort. Marshal Clint Darrow stood to the right of the detector, arms crossed over his stocky frame. His shoulders didn't shift when she entered, but his eyes, pale, recessed, followed her like a spotlight. Odessa didn't look at him. She had walked through too many doors like this, in too many cities, to offer deference where it hadn't been earned. "Ma'am," Darrow called out, voice flat as asphalt. "I'm going to need you to step aside." She stopped, turned slightly. "Is there a problem?" "No problem, just standard procedure. Random check." Her fingers tightened slightly on the leather strap of her case. "I've already been cleared through the federal system. My badge." "Random check," he repeated, louder this time. "This is Claiborne. We don't skip protocol." She met his gaze, steady and unmoved. Slowly, Odessa reached into her coat pocket and produced her credentials. A leather trifold, neatly worn at the edges. She opened it to reveal her ID and extended it toward him. Darrow didn't reach for it. He looked at the photo, then at her face, and smirked. "Name's not familiar, no robe either. You a paralegal or something?" She didn't answer. She just waited. Darrow finally took the badge, barely glanced at the words before tossing it onto a nearby table. "Step this way." He gestured toward a narrow hallway flanking the main checkpoint. Elijah Park, the young clerk at the corner desk, shifted slightly in his chair. His eyes tracked the exchange. His pen paused mid-line on the intake log. Odessa noticed the hesitation, the flicker of something unsettled in him. But he said nothing. Darrow pushed open a door labeled secondary screening and waved her in. The room beyond was sterile, white walls, a single steel chair in the center, a desk pushed against the side, and a medical cart with a handheld scanner. On the edge of the cart, a set of electric clippers rested, unplugged. "Have a seat," Darrow said. "I don't consent to this," Odessa replied evenly. "You don't need to. It's visual inspection only," he lied. He stepped past her, picked up the clippers, and plugged them into the wall socket. The buzz that followed broke the air like a slap. Odessa didn't move. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Can't be too careful," he muttered, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. "These styles sometimes hide contraband." She blinked once. Her face remained unreadable. Without further warning, he stepped behind her. The cold metal of the clippers touched the nape of her neck. Then, ZZZT. The first coil fell, silver, thick, and heavy. It landed on the linoleum tile with a whisper. He chuckled. "Let's make you a little more presentable." Another pass. Another lock of hair fell. Odessa's hands rested calmly on her lap. Her breathing slowed, each inhale deliberate, each exhale precise. Not a word. Not a protest. But something in the room shifted. Like pressure before a storm, the clippers kept buzzing. Darrow wiped sweat from his temple with the back of his glove, flicked more coils aside with his boot, His expression was careless, amused. This wasn't a protocol. This was performance. Odessa stared at the wall, blank, white, unmarked. But in her stillness, calculation brewed, quiet and merciless. Finally, the clippers went silent. Darrow pulled off the gloves, tossed them onto the tray, and reached for a towel to dust hair from his sleeves. And then he saw it, resting on the metal table where he'd tossed it earlier. Her badge. Clear, centered, undeniable. Dr. Odessa Harper, Executive Director, Mid-South Judicial Integrity Fund. He froze. The towel slipped from his fingers. Odessa didn't turn, didn't blink. The silence in the room was no longer passive. It was judgment. The man who laughed while cutting her hair now sat across from her, waiting for funding approval. Clint Darrow's nameplate rested slightly crooked on the table, its brass edge catching the fluorescent lights in nervous pulses. He didn't reach to adjust it. His hands were busy, one gripping the armrest of his chair, the other curled in a twitching fist just beneath the table's edge. Odessa Harper stepped into the room like she belonged there, which, in truth, she did. Her cropped, silver hair, uneven and raw at the edges, made no attempt to hide what had been taken from her. She wore no hat, no scarf, just the same tailored navy suit, the same posture of quiet command, and the same leather case now resting closed on the table in front of her. She walked to the center seat, usually reserved for visiting state auditors or grant reviewers, and sat down without asking permission. No one stopped her. No one dared. Never announce the storm, her brother Micah once told her. Just be the lightning. The courthouse budget oversight room was too bright. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead like a nervous tick. Rows of department heads and administrative staff sat in metal folding chairs facing the long table. An American flag stood stiffly in the corner, unmoving, even as tension twisted through the air like a pressure front. Nora Williamson, the note-taker, sat 2 seats away from Darrow. Her eyes flicked between Odessa and the man beside her, pen poised but unmoving. Elijah Park lingered by the wall, not quite seated, not quite participating. His clipboard hugged to his chest like a shield. His gaze darted to Odessa's hair, then quickly away. Odessa opened her case. She did not address the elephant in the room, did not mention the clippers, did not refer to the indignity. She didn't need to. It was written across the expressions of everyone present. "Let's begin," she said simply, voice smooth but low. "Marshal Darrow. I reviewed the last 3 years of officer training expenditures. I'm concerned about the lack of trauma-informed response protocols." Darrow blinked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He cleared his throat. The state hasn't mandated specific updates yet, ma'am." "I see." Odessa flipped a page. "And the 2022 budget increase for equipment? $14,700 was allocated for non-lethal gear, yet we have reports of 5 taser-related hospitalizations last year. How do you account for that?" He shifted in his seat, his jaw twitched. Sometimes individuals react differently to the same stimulus. "Interesting," she said, eyes still on her notes, especially when 3 of those individuals were under 18. A quiet ripple moved through the room. No gasps, just a shuffle of feet, the creak of a chair leg. Odessa continued, methodical. "Now, about complaint resolution. Can you walk us through your process when an allegation is filed against courthouse personnel?" Darrow's hands, still clenched, now had sweat glinting between the knuckles. "We document, log, submit to internal review. Is that review conducted within your own office?" "Yes, but under oversight." She looked up for the first time, not at him, at Elijah. "Elijah," she said, tone unchanging. "You manage intake logs, correct?" He stiffened. Yes, ma'am." Her gaze remained steady. "Did you witness what happened this morning?" The room froze. Even the lights seemed to buzz quieter. Elijah's lips parted. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. His fingers twitched against the clipboard. He looked at Darrow, then at Nora, then back to Odessa. But no words came. He swallowed, once. The silence felt heavy, like water pressing against the chest. Odessa did not push. Her expression didn't harden. She didn't lean forward or raise her voice. Instead, she turned her attention back to the table and closed her folder. "Let's continue," she said, as if nothing had been asked. "Transparency starts here. Everyone knew. This isn't over. When truth has been silenced long enough, even a whisper can shatter the room. The rain came slowly, just a soft tapping at first, a faint rhythm against the tall courthouse windows that lined the third-floor hallway. The earlier buzz of voices and shuffling papers had dimmed into something taut and brittle, the kind of hush that follows revelation but precedes consequence. Odessa Harper sat alone in the break room's side hallway, a thin paperback open on her lap but untouched. Her eyes followed the words without seeing them. She was still in the same suit, the same quiet presence, but something in her jaw had set firmer, like wet cement beginning to hold shape. She didn't look up when Elijah Park approached. He walked slowly, a paper cup in hand, steam curling from the lid, though he hadn't sipped it. His steps faltered when he saw her, then resumed with forced steadiness. When he stopped a few feet away, Odessa finally turned a page. "I didn't," Elijah started, then paused. "I should have said something. This morning, I was right there." She didn't reply immediately. Her eyes stayed on the page a second longer than needed before she folded the book shut and met his gaze. "I know," she said, calm. I froze. I just stood there. I saw what he did." "You weren't the only one who did nothing," Odessa said gently, but not kindly. "But freezing is different from condoning. One can be thawed." Elijah looked down, his fingers tightened around the cup. "It's not an excuse, but I've only been here 3 years. You start thinking silence is safer. It's not courage that's punished. It's interruption." Odessa tilted her head slightly. Her voice softened. "Have you ever looked at audit redundancies?" He blinked. "I sort of. Mostly I scan for missing receipts or duplicate billing." "Why?" She reached into the inside pocket of her case and pulled out a single printed page, creased neatly in half. "This is from 2018, a line buried inside a closed expenditure report. Misfiled under incidentals." He unfolded the page and read the top line aloud. "Complaint regarding physical search at checkpoint, described as invasive, degrading, racially motivated." Odessa watched him. Same location. Same procedure. Same man. Elijah swallowed. She leaned back slightly. "It was marked as resolved. No investigation." He stared at the paper, as if it weighed more than it should. Then nodded, slowly. "How many more?" "That's the question." From around the corner, Nora Williamson paused. Her hands were full of manila folders from the archives, but she held her breath as the conversation filtered through the hallway. She wasn't meant to hear, but some silences were meant to break. She stood there a moment longer, unsure whether to move forward or backward, then turned, clutching the folders tighter, and walked quickly toward the records room, her heels clicking softly across the tile. The rain picked up, no longer a gentle tapping but a steadier percussion, like fingers drumming on glass. That night, long after most staff had gone home and the halls had quieted to echoes, Nora remained. She stood at the back of the archives room, hands trembling slightly as she reached for the silver chain around her neck. From it, she pulled a small key, dull, unmarked, warm from her skin. She bent down to a drawer at the base of an old oak cabinet and slid the key into the lock. It clicked softly. Inside were folders, 12, bound in red tape, labeled "Closed," "Resolved." Dust clung to the edges. Dates stretched back almost a decade. She lifted them out, one by one. Later, she climbed the stairs to the upper offices, her arms wrapped tightly around the files. At the end of the hallway, a door was still cracked open. Odessa looked up from her desk when she heard the knock. Nora stepped in slowly, then placed a folder on the desk, her voice barely steady. "They told me to shred them. I didn't." Odessa didn't speak. Her fingers brushed over the faded labels as she opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the contents, flipping page after page in deliberate silence. 12, she murmured. 12 times he could have been stopped. Some pages collect dust. Others collect blood. The overhead lights in the budget oversight room buzzed faintly, like they knew something was about to snap. The folding chairs, once half filled with disinterested staff, were now occupied wall to wall by journalists, courthouse personnel, and a few members of the public who had elbowed their way past confused interns and overwhelmed receptionists. Outside, chants pulsed faintly through the courthouse walls, a metronome of rising tension. Odessa Harper sat at the same table as before, same navy suit, same cropped hair, but her eyes, those had sharpened, not with anger, but with precision. She placed her leather case in front of her, opened it slowly, and pulled out a stack of documents bound only by a black clip. No ceremony, no introduction. She cleared her throat once and read, voice level. He told me I didn't look like someone with rights. Anonymous complainant, 2012. The words dropped like glass. The room stilled. She placed the page flat on the table. Then, one by one, laid down 11 more. Each sheet aligned perfectly. Each name, each date, each signature, untouched by dust. "Elijah," she said without turning her head, "you verified these dates for me, yes?" His voice was quiet but audible. "Yes, ma'am." "And Nora, you confirm these complaints were marked as resolved, without proper investigation?" Nora nodded, her folded hands tightening. "Yes." Odessa looked down the table toward Clint Darrow. He sat rigidly, red spreading from his collar to the tips of his ears. "This is a violation of internal process." Odessa raised a hand. "Let's talk about protocol. Yours specifically." She flipped one sheet so the room could see. 2015. Complaint from a retired teacher. Detained without cause at checkpoint. The form says, "Resolved. No misconduct." Signed with these initials. She held up another. 2017. A 16-year-old girl. Said she was touched during a search. Resolved. No further action. Same initials. She tapped her pen once on the stack. Clint Darrow's initials, all 12. A wave of murmurs rippled across the room. Someone at the back coughed. The camera from CNN South adjusted its focus. The live stream light flicked green. Darrow stood. "These are cherry-picked. Old cases. The department?" "No," Odessa interrupted. "You are the department. That's the problem." Her voice was still even, but the tone had changed, tightened like a pulled wire. She reached into her case one final time and drew out a folded sheet of official state stationery. Tennessee Code Section 47B9 grants emergency oversight authority in cases of repeated ethical violations by sworn officials, she said, unfolding the letter. "In consultation with the Mid-South Judicial Integrity Fund and the State Office of Administrative Accountability, I invoke that statute now." A pause. The kind of pause that makes time bend. Effective immediately, Marshal Clint Darrow is suspended pending full investigation. Chairs scraped as two deputies from the rear stepped forward. They weren't in a rush. They didn't bark orders. They didn't need to. Darrow froze. His jaw moved, but no words came. The sweat on his brow now dripped in a line down his cheek. One of the deputies gestured. Darrow turned stiffly and began walking. As he passed Odessa, he didn't dare meet her eyes. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. "That wasn't justice," she said, not loudly, but clearly. "This is." The clatter of handcuffs snapped through the air like a punctuation mark. The door opened. The chants from outside, low and angry, slipped in before it closed again. Odessa remained seated. She gathered the pages in front of her with care, aligned the corners, slid them back into her case. From her chair, she glanced sideways. Elijah was standing closer now, not behind her. Nora's hands had finally relaxed. Their silence had changed. Not fear anymore. Choice. Justice doesn't just punish. It rewrites what's possible. The overhead lights in the converted press hall flickered once before stabilizing. Outside, the November sky dimmed into a rich indigo, and from the cracked windows, the echo of cheering protesters floated in, no longer shouts of anger, but of arrival. Folding chairs were lined in rows, some occupied by reporters, others by courthouse staff who had lingered long past their shifts. At the back, cameras adjusted, lenses zoomed, and boom mics hung like quiet witnesses waiting to catch something historic. Odessa Harper stepped up to the podium in the same navy suit she had worn at dawn. Her cropped hair, uneven and silver, caught the fluorescent glare like battle-scar tissue. She did not smooth her jacket. She did not clear her throat. She looked at the sea of faces and began. "My name is Dr. Odessa Harper," she said, not needing to raise her voice. "And I am here to speak not just as a woman harmed by this courthouse, but as someone who refused to leave it broken." Micah Harper stood at the very back of the room, tall, still, hands folded in front of him. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. Odessa didn't need to look to know he was there. His presence had always been her still point. Behind the camera lines, Nora Williamson stood off to the side, no longer hiding behind her notepad. Elijah Park was near the door, arms folded, not in defiance, but in quiet conviction. For the first time that day, neither of them looked unsure. Odessa tapped the microphone once. What happened this morning was not an isolated incident. It was the 12th documented abuse, and the first that someone in power refused to let disappear. She took a breath and unfolded a sheet of paper. Not notes, just a framework of something larger. Effective immediately, the Mid-South Judicial Integrity Fund is enacting a new initiative, formally titled the Harper Mandate. A hush. Cameras clicked. One reporter adjusted his tie. This mandate includes 3 core reforms, Odessa continued. First, all courthouse personnel, security, bailiffs, clerks will undergo quarterly implicit bias training and mandatory de-escalation protocols. A few heads turned among the local staff in the room. Second, every marshal and deputy will complete annual psychological evaluations. These will not be handled in-house. They will be administered by independent, licensed professionals unaffiliated with the county. A soft exhale rippled from somewhere in the second row. And third, all courthouse budgets, specifically allocations related to personnel, equipment, and complaint resolution, will be subject to quarterly review by an independent oversight panel funded by, but not controlled by, the Integrity Fund. She let the words sit for a moment. No theatrics, no swelling music, just precision. This will begin here, in Claiborne County, but it will not end here. She didn't take questions. Not yet. She looked out, eyes scanning the room with measured weight. Claiborne wasn't a failure of one man, she said. It was the success of a system built to fail people like me. The room erupted. Reporters raised hands. Voices collided midair. A journalist from the Clarion Ledger shouted something about statewide adoption. Another from CNN asked if she would consider running for office. Odessa raised one hand, palm steady. The crowd softened. One at a time, she said, not smiling, but not cold. You'll all be heard. A younger woman near the front stood. Is this personal, Dr. Harper? Odessa didn't blink. Of course it's personal, she said. So is dignity. So is decency. The room stilled, not with silence, but with weight. Then, beneath it all, a small vibration hummed in her coat pocket. She didn't reach for it immediately. But when the screen lit up, she saw the message. U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, testimony request, urgent. She didn't react outwardly, but something subtle shifted behind her eyes. The Harper Mandate had just redrawn a line, and Washington had noticed. This time, the Clippers didn't strip her. They crowned her. The hum of soft jazz threaded through Odessa Harper's kitchen like a balm. Warm light spilled from the hanging lamp overhead, casting a golden glow over the tiled counter, and the kettle gently hissing on the back burner. Peppermint drifted in the air, sharp and sweet, mingling with the quiet. Odessa sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded loosely in her lap. Her posture had changed. Less armor, more presence. The week had taken much from her, but left her something stronger in return. Her hair, uneven from days ago, curled awkwardly above her ears. But she wasn't hiding it, she was facing it now. On her terms. Micah stood behind her, sleeves rolled to the elbow, clippers in one hand. His fingers were steady as ever, old barber muscle memory. But softer now, more deliberate. No rush, no orders, no control. You sure about this? He asked, gently brushing loose strands from her collar. I am, she said. This time, it's mine. He nodded once and clicked the clippers to life. The low buzz wasn't jarring, not like the sharp whine in the courthouse room. This sound was rounder, softer, like memory reworked into something new. He began trimming the uneven patches, shaping a clean, even style that framed her face with intention instead of violation. Each pass of the blades left behind clarity. A quiet knock on the door startled neither of them. Odessa called out without turning. Come in! The door creaked open, and Jamira stepped inside. 14, eyes wide, a thin gold chain glittering against her collarbone. Her shaved head gleamed beneath the warm light. I brought something, she said, holding out a folded card. Odessa motioned for her to come closer. Jamira placed the card on the table. You made it okay for girls like me to be seen. Odessa's fingers lingered on the card for a moment before opening it. Inside, a short note written in tight cursive. For showing me that silence can still speak. Thank you. She looked up. Jamira's voice was quieter now. Why didn't you cry when he cut it? Odessa didn't answer right away. She met the girl's eyes, then smiled, not out of pride, but recognition. Because I wanted them to remember the silence louder than the scream. Micah finished the final pass. He unplugged the clippers, wiped them clean, then stepped aside, placing a handheld mirror in front of her. Odessa took it slowly, angled it to catch the reflection. What she saw wasn't the woman from the courthouse hallway. It wasn't even the executive director or the reform architect. It was something fuller, stitched from all of it. Wounds, choices, stillness, resistance. She smiled. The knock came again, firmer this time. Micah crossed the room and opened the door to a woman in a dark blazer, badge clipped at her waist, envelope in hand. "For Dr. Harper," she said. Odessa stood and took the envelope. The seal shimmered under the kitchen light. She opened it, read silently, then looked up. "They want me in D.C. Tuesday." Micah raised an eyebrow. "You ready?" Odessa didn't hesitate. "I've been ready." They just weren't. The Clippers had once marked her as a target. Now they marked her as a choice. In the quiet of her kitchen, Odessa Harper didn't just reclaim her dignity. She reshaped the legacy of silence into a mandate for change. Justice, after all, isn't loud. It's steady, rooted in the decisions we make when no one is watching. And sometimes, the most powerful revolt isn't in raising your voice, but in refusing to lower your gaze. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone who still believes silence can't speak.